This week in the Boardroom, brought to you by NYSE Governance Services Corporate Board Member, along with Governance Knowledge Partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to This Week in the Boardroom. I'm Scott Cutler, Executive Vice President with NYSE, and I'm joined here today with my co-host Duncan Niederauer. We are here just wrapping up the conference this week in Davos, and this is a great opportunity for us to be able to reflect back on what the global leadership around the world is talking about. And so, Duncan, with the directors that we've got tuned in here, I wanted to just talk very quickly about some of the observations and takeaways from this week. So, what's your big takeaway so far?
Well, one of the things we talked a lot about at dinner last night was the increasing importance of data security. A lot of us think this is a bank or credit card company issue. You're worried about identity theft, you're worried about cybercrime, you're worried about cybersecurity. We spent a good part of our dinner last night that we hosted for about 50 clients, hearing from experts from the military, experts from the diplomatic industry, and we heard a lot from cyber experts themselves. And I think my big takeaway last night, Scott, was this should be on every board's agenda. No matter what business you're in, understand, are you vulnerable to these kind of attacks, and what does it mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. We've been here for 7 years attending this event, and this is certainly, of the last 7 years, the most palpable optimism that everybody feels about the economy. Last year we were really focused on risks in China. We were concerned about Europe, we were talking about Greece, and we were talking about sovereign debts. In many respects, the people coming in this year came in optimistic and are leaving optimistic. Has that been your impression as well?
So Scott and I have been coming here for, 7 or 8 years together now. And the saying I've always had is, if you come here optimistic, you leave pessimistic, and if you come here pessimistic, you leave somewhat homicidal almost, because you just get talked into being more pessimistic. I don't know if people are unrealistic or if they're just tired of being pessimistic, because things are certainly better. But it just was seeping with optimism this week, which I found a little surprising. There's a lot of good things going on, but there's still a lot of wood to chop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for those companies that operate on a global basis, one of the things that we talked a lot about was really growth and the growth potential. And if anything, the reality is we're probably not growing at the potential that we could, but certainly this Davos is a lot more focused on what's happening with the growth in the United States and divergence instead of convergence. And what I mean by that is the emerging economies are not actually growing as fast as what's happening in the United States. And so there's a tremendous amount of business focus and political focus on what's happening in the U.S., and that's a little bit different than where we were.
Different in the past. I remember the U.S. doesn't send a big delegation here either, right? But I was just at a meeting that Christine Lagarde chaired, and she gave a speech last week reminding us all that 75% plus of the growth in 2014 is expected to come from developed markets, which just 2 years ago were seen here at Davos as almost irrelevant. I'm not saying that was right or wrong, but now what we've learned is the emerging markets give, but the emerging markets also take, because by definition they tend to be a little less stable, they tend to be a little less predictable, they tend to be more volatile. And I think the last theme we'll leave you guys with is, and this happens every year at Davos, I don't think this has really changed. Scott and I went to a lot of meetings where corporate responsibility was fully on the agenda. You know, some company events we went to, they talked almost not at all about their business, but their role in the communities and jurisdictions in which they operate, how they're trying to make things better for the world around them. And I don't think that's something that we just see at Davos anymore. I think that's also got to be in every board's agenda going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. That role of stakeholder, which is the role of the corporation within society, in your local community, and the responsibility that people have to employees. I mean, one thing that I'm taking away from a lot of the CEOs is really the focus again on the human aspect. How do you invest in your people to be able to expand growth? Not just how do I have less people to do more, how do I invest more in people to make people more productive?
How do you stay engaged with your employees and ensure that the environment is focused on? So I think just to recap it, as you take away, the takeaways from here from our point of view for board members are, put data security on your agenda no matter what business you're in, and just make sure you're covered because it is getting more and more sophisticated. Secondly, keep that role of corporate citizen front and center. That was a big takeaway from here. And I think thirdly, understand, at least in a place that's normally pessimistic, the world seems pretty optimistic. Our CEOs certainly tell us they see opportunities around the world, but boy is it critical to be nimble now because places that were obvious investment jurisdictions 2-3 years ago, not so much right now. So good luck to everybody. We're going to sign off from here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, and tune in next week for another topic on This Week in the Boardroom. Thank you.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by NYSE Governance Services, Corporate Board Member, along with Governance Knowledge Partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.